All right, welcome back. So we've got the basis of the JWT tokens and signing completed for the application, and we can show that here in Postman. So if we look at the controllers, what we've ended up with is on the accounts controller, I have authorize, which is for the authorized endpoint for OAuth 2.0, and we don't have this set up specifically for any type yet. This is an HTTP GET. I'm realizing that we could probably do this as like a string response type. And then probably like a string redirect URI. And then also a string for the state. And all of this can be from query string. Like that. Like that. Okay. And all I'm doing in here is we followed the OAuth 2.0 protocol, and we're making sure that validating that code and token or token was passed in as the type. Hey, Follow and Hope, thank you so much there for that subscription. I appreciate that, man. Oh, man, that's awesome. Thank you, man. All right, so here the response is good. If you have any questions, man, just pop them in, but thank you again. So we followed the OAuth 2.0 protocol for this, and that's how we wrote in the location. Let me jump back over to the protocols. Good luck finding it. Yeah, I found it. Okay. And we were down here in authorization code grant. We don't need this any longer. We don't need that any longer. That's fine. Okay. And then we also started to write in our token, which takes a token request, and we just have these base parameters that we're passing in here. Hey, Pello, how are you doing, man? So long, man. It's so good to see you. Should probably remove that link. Which link is that? Which link are you looking at? Oh, thank you. I didn't even see that. I didn't even see that. Cool. Okay. So over here for the token, we're doing this for the x www formed URL encoded. And I'm doing this with basic authorization to begin with. And then if not, I'm doing it from the what's passed in from the request. Okay. So we're ready to start. We can check. This is just returning the IP address here. And then if I look at the yeah, that looks pretty good. So let's do some testing, okay? So over here on my accounts, on my home controller, I've added this index page. We don't need this to be asynchronous. And index is just going to load if it's authorized. So when we run this, no problem following. Oh, no problem at all. And run it again. You can see 401 and we are unauthorized. So in Postman, what I'm going to do, is I'm going to issue a call out to the token endpoint. Which is going to generate a token. So this right here, we can generate one of these. This comes from my client ID. So in Application Database Controller, we have this test client, and we'll open up a new window here and go to base 64 encode online. And it's test client, and the secret is this. And when we base 64 encode that, we end up with this string. And when I send this across, now we're using basic auth to decode the types, so test client and secret. And then we're going to generate our token. You can see we have a little bit of work that we need to do in here with the local host and assigning the audience and issuer. We're going to write it, create the refresh token, and return the response. And there it is. So now I can take the access token, and if I look over here, this one is just hitting the index, and I get a 401. And now when I add in the bearer token and run it, it's still giving me unauthorized. That's interesting. Why would it be giving me unauthorized? Let's take a look at this. So we can open up a new window, and we can go to JWT decode. Issuer is localhost, audience is localhost. Sub looks fine. So let's close this, and let's do a little bit of cleanup. So in my client, where I am in accounts, here, I want to have a new couple of we want to add in the string for the audiences. And we probably want that to be an array. So that probably has got to be another item. And then we want to add in a string for the issuer. Now, when we look at the docs for this, for audience versus issuer JWT, identifies the principal that issued the JWT as issuer. Audience identifies the recipients that it was intended for. So this is recipients for generated JWTs, and this is going to be identifier for who generated JWTs. So we need to make a new class called Client Audience. And this is just going to have a string called audience. And we want to put this in a table called clients audiences. And a client audience is going to have a client ID like that. And then client is going to have a number of client audiences. And in the context, we need to add in a DB set for client audience. So down here now we're going to have a model builder .entity called client audience. And we want to make sure that we have data for a and it's a client ID, and then an audience is localhost. So the GUID of the client is this. And we need a new GUID for this one. Okay. And so over here we can get rid of the audiences. In here, the issuer is localhost. Now, when we look at where I'm doing my validations, I'm doing them here in the startup. So I've added authorization and authentication. So here we are looking at the issuer, the audience, and the lifetime. So I want to have a new bool called validate issuer. Another one for the validate audience. Another one for the validate lifetime. Another one for the validate issuer signing key. We have our issuer and our audience here. And there we go. So when I look at my account service, I'm going to change this to be called JWT service. And here we're going to pass in probably some kind of an interface for iClient ID or a GUID for the client ID. No, that's fine. But we'll leave this for now. Secret. So here our audience. This is for when we want to generate the token. So this is for who it is. This is for the recipients of JWTs, right? So that should be in the client here, right? But so you want to include here the audience. And the issuer is from the client. That comes from client.audience. I'm sorry, issuer. And we want to say that the audience must be specified because one client could have multiple audiences. Okay. So back over here now, this would be on the client side, right? And we're going to separate these into two APIs. These are options that are specified for this API in particular, not this client. So let's separate them, okay? So I'm going to make a new project here. And I'm going to call it a new ASP.NET Core web application. I'm going to call it authservice.net.WebAPI. And all I want this to be is an API project. Configured for HTTPS, and why not? We'll add Docker. So in this, we're going to bring over these two. So we're adding authorization, and then we're adding JWT bearers. Bearer tokens. In our globals, we want to add a public static string for the Web API issuer. And we want to call that localhost. We're going to change these to be const. Okay. And then we also want to have the Web API audience. And so this is going to be who issued the token. This is auth service server.net. And this one is who is the token intended for. This is auth service.net.webapi. So over here we could do globals dot. We're going to add a new project in here, which is a class library C# core. And I want to call this auth server.variables. Server.net.variables, and I don't want to go too deep with these things, but I need to have it right now. And we'll create that. And in here, I'm going to bring my globals. I should have brought that in under standard, so let's redo that real quick. We want class library .NET standard. That was crazy. That was totally crazy. Okay, let's try that again. This folder, like that. And we'll bring globals in. And we want to say variables. Okay. Back over here, we want to add in that's fine. That's fine. Okay, over here we need to add in the JWT bearers. So we want to say add JWT bearer .NET Core 3.1 missing. This one. So we're going to add that here. We can't use that version because we're not using 5 yet. Okay. This one needs authentication as well as authorization. This one doesn't need either. And now we can add in these missing types. Under client, we don't need these because that's done on the client side. So my issuer that is valid here is going to be the issuer, which I want to call auth server URI. And I'm going to say that this is the WebAPI server URI. We're also going to need to have a int for the port. And this is going to be globals.WebAPI server URI. So when I look at where I'm creating my client, I'm specifying the issuer here. Where that's being generated. We should do this as a GUID for our client audience ID. We'll keep it the other way. And then issuer here is set. So that's right. Right. Okay. That looks good. So we've added our authorization and our authentication here and down here in the configure. And in the net, I don't think we need to serve static files, but maybe, I don't know. I don't really want to mess with that, okay? Okay, well, we can dial this in a little bit. But I think that's pretty good. I think we're about ready to go back. Let's make sure everything works. So So we're going to start both projects. And when I look at the port, where is it? 44303. And the web API is on 44372. And we want to go and protect our resource, which is this one here. Okay, we're going to start both projects. Now in here where I'm generating this, we want to know for which client but I don't think you're supposed to use clients for multiple purposes, so I feel like the audience should just be a constant. Right? I build a client application for each one of the things that I want to authenticate. I don't create one and then multiple clients on it. Do I? Let me go check one of these that I have. For a project where I have multiple clients. You have multiple sets of credentials. Let me look at one with different OAuth ones. They have different client IDs. EJD. Okay. Cool. That simplifies it. So that means that in the entities, under models, entities, we can get rid of client audience completely. And we can just add on here audience. And we want to say that this is the URI of who generated the JWTs. and this is URI who receives the JWTs. Which means that here we can scrap this and use client.audience. And then we need to, what are potential token types? I think we've seen bearer, JWT, what else? Is there an ID token? What else? We'll look into that in a little bit. Weird. Okay. And that looks good. When I look at where this is being created, we can get rid of these client audiences. We can add audience equals localhost. And then over here we can change this to be globals dot down here we want to add in a new key for the public const string. We're going to call it WebAPI server client secret. Which we're just going to call it this for now. And then we're going to do a public const string web API server client ID. And then the issuer is going to be a well, we have a different thing. We have something called like a resource, right? Because I'm blending the two here. So let's add another class in here. And we're going to call it I'm going to pull back up the definition here. And we want to call it a resource server. And that's a base entity. And we'll put that in a table called resource servers. And all this is going to have is a resource server URI. We could just call this URI. And we're going to join these with scopes, right? So when I look at this again, my client implicit is going to generate this token. Like that. And so now where we do that in the JWT service here, and we're generating this, I want to generate that for a well, it could be so you also want to include a GUID for the resource server ID. And you want this to be your GUID for the client ID. Okay, so we're going to add in here a resource servers. And we want to get the first or default one where the, come on, x.id is equal to the resource server ID and the x.active is true. So in my context, I'm going to add in the resource server called resource servers. And down here, we're going to add a new entity called a Resource Server, which has the data. And it's going to be the ID we need, the URI as localhost. And a resource server is going to be owned by a application user. Like that. And over here on the context, we're going to add in a resource servers. We also want to give it a name. Like that. Okay. So we want to get a new GUID here. And paste that one in. Okay. So the client implicit is who generates the token. Resource servers are who are working with them. So we need to have scopes that connect them. But I also want to have records which are going to allow these to communicate to each other. So there should be a client resource server. Hold on. So on here, we want to have a string of the issuer URI. Hold on. Because a client could have multiple resource servers. So I think we want to connect this instead to a client ID. This is called a Resource Server URI, and then we don't need that. So we're just validating these over here, that my globals is this one. That's fine. That's fine. I think we're ready to try it out. So we don't have anything here for the CORS policy, but let's see what happens. Yeah, it happened for me too, A Fallen Hope. Now when you get your request, you have a client ID and a secret. Just a second. It's like you want to use this secret to identify which one of the servers it's connected to, right? Which means that for each one of the OAuth clients, it's going to have a number of these resource servers that's going to have an ID and a secret on it. Just a second here. Okay, I'm okay with this. I need to think about this for a little bit because let me look one more time at something. Type, you register it as a type. You get credentials for it. That's an individual inside of a project. Okay. Okay, so we're going to add a layer in here. We're going to add a new entity called projects. And in this, I want it to be similar to what client is doing. So it has application user, and then it's also going to have a number of clients, which is going to have a project ID and a project. So now each client will also have a audience URI. It's like application users using the app. Projects managing each one of these clients. But a client doesn't represent the resource, right? They're not even connected. Because you could generate a token here in the client and then use it in this resource server. When you do that, it would be by the properties that are defined on each. And then scopes. So the resource server Tell you what, guys, I'm getting tired for the day, so I'm going to cut here. We're going to pick up again tomorrow. Let's say we'll start pretty early. I'll try to start around 7. So if we have any questions, this is a great time to put them into the chat at our Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios. And yeah, thanks again, guys, and have a great rest of your day.